we just finished the second part of the Gersa Kedesh. The first inyan in this Gersa Kedesh is the idea of Ein Sof. The Yeshus comes through Eid. And the second inyan is that the manifestation of this Yeshus happens through Kalim and through Malchus of Atzilus and Eid Neshama and so forth. Now the Rebbe gets to the last point, and in a way, just the most important point, and that is, there's Malchus and Atzilus, there's Malchus and Bria, Malchus and Yetzirah. In each case, the Kalim and Malchus, since they're the lowest level, they're the place of his Chalkus and Kesed Elyon, and Malchus, and all those other reasons, Malchus becomes the base for the creation of Yeshus. Well, guess what? The earth of Elam Hazeh is the ultimate Yesh, and the ultimate creator of Yeshus, the lowest level. And there's a Keach Ein Sof to create Yeshus Take Davke in the earth. In other words, not Malchus of Atzilus, but Asiyah, Hagashmi. And he says, there's another thing you have to know in addition to everything we discussed until now. And that is, Ha'ara. A light of a lakus, which, so to speak, delivers the possibility of Yeshus, to create actual Yeshus through Malchus in the lower world. Okay, says the Rebbe V'chala, now in all the above, Himare Keicha V'Yacholta demonstrates its strength and its possibility more than anywhere else, B'Yeseda Afar Agashmi, in the earth, physical element of earth. Afar is the lowest of all four elements, Hagashmim, Eishruch, Maim, and Afar. You see the idea that Caleb revealed the Yeshus that Ar delivers in Gashmith more than any place else. And it's Begili Atzam, but yes it is, with a revelation which is far more intense, than the elements above it, meaning to say fire, wind, and water. Okay? But moreover, that it's even more manifest. Moreover, it's more manifest mitzvah Hashemayim from the hosts of heaven. The earth is more of a kli, more of a machalik, more of Kesed Elyon, Kesed Malchus, to deliver and to reveal the Yeshus of Eid than Eish Ruach Mayim Hagashmim, and for sure more than the Shamayim Hagashmim. They don't have the power and possibility to manifest Yesh Mayim Tamid, Ki Yeseda off of the element of earth, Hamatzmiach Tamid Yesh Mayim, which is constantly creating Yesh Mayim, which are grasses and trees. In other words, maybe in the beginning of time you could have said that somehow from Shemayim to Aretz was in for Yesh Mayim. But right now, there's no new creations coming from heaven to earth. There's no new creations happening from fire and wind and water. The only place you see new creations, and you see it all the time, is in what's called Mother Earth, in the earth. Okay? It says, how could you say that only Afar, only the earth, is revealing Yesh Mayim now? We know that the Gemara says, every single blade of grass, and every leaf, and every tree, and every so forth, is getting chayes from the mazalos, from the stars and the constellations, which are shamayim. So they're also involved in Yesh Mayim. Says the Rebbe, no. The answer to this question is that only once the grass has sprouted, and it already exists, so the mazel makes it mikatnas lagados. From nothing to something, the yeshus, the creation of the yeshus of the grass happens only from the earth. Once the grass has poked its head out of the earth and it exists in a small way, the mazel could nourish it. That's not yesh mayayin, that's yesh mayesh. It's enhancing a new, an already existent being rather than creating it. Okay, however, 1 second. It's like a child eats food. When the baby is born, that's a creation. The child eats food, it's not a new creation, it's expansion. Mikatas Nagala. It's not telling it to come into being from a non-existential form to a separate and independent being. From small to big. Okay? And to carry the fruits of each individual species individually. Prior to its sprouting, to whom should speak, each mazel, lochal esav to each individual grass, individually if they don't exist yet. So the koyach of Yesh Mayim is in the earth, and the idea of katas comes from else. Now you have to understand something. Hashem made the world Yesh Mayim. The Ramban writes, a famous Ramban, Hashem made the world Yesh Mayim, and after that first moment, there's no more Yesh Mayim. That's it. Everything's Yesh Mayesh. Haylada, reproduction, of human beings, lahavdil animals, and lahavdil plants, which is what he's speaking about over here, is not really yesh mayayin. It's l'chayda yesh mayesh. But al piteda, it's an inyan of yesh mayayin. Farvos, the reason these in Yonim are mashal for yesh mayayin, because they have a similarity to yesh mayayin. And al piteda, it's a keach ein sof. In other words, something you have to understand. Babies have been born in the billions. That's what it is. Al piteda, the birth of every child's a nes. So it's perfectly natural, and you can argue that it's explicable in biology and in science and so forth. Every event of birth is a nes. Why?
Nes in the sense that it should be
that it's unscientific. You can't explain it in Torah.
Right.
Why? Because the law of nature says that everything is going towards hafsedus, towards deterioration. If everything is going towards deterioration, it should be true that every later generation should be weaker than the generation before.
Weaker?
Yes.
Isn't it like that?
No.
What did he say?
In other words, you should be healthy based on the age that your parents conceived you. If your parents are younger, you should be healthy because they were healthier. And if your parents are older, you should be weaker because they were less robust. Fact of the matter is, when a baby is born, that baby is as viable as its parents were when their parents were babies. And the parents, when they were babies, are as viable not as their parents were at the age of conception, but as their parents were at the age that their parents were babies. In other words, by the procreation defies the clock. Every generation is like the first generation. It's as new and it's robust. It's as alive. It's as useful the first generation. Heipach hateva, the law of entropy, the law of Hafsedus says that there should be a weakening from generation to generation. And this is one reason why there's a yesh mayayin aspect here. There's a nes aspect. But this nes aspect doesn't so much have to do with yesh mayayin, with creating a new mitzias. It has to do with the defiance of the law of teva that says entropy, deterioration, Hafsedus. It's not so negated this against the Kiddush. This is against the case you get the word for Yeshus. What's the word of Yeshus? The word of Yeshus is, you have a zachar and a keva, a father and a mother. That child is not 50% zachar, 50% nekeva. That child is 100% child. In other words, the way the Eibishter designs the Haylad, the creation of a new generation, is that the first thing that happens is, although there's a contribution based on this tipas hanukva, this tipas hatchar, but what happens is the tipa that the father gives, the tipa that the mother gives, as was mentioned before, rats, it goes away, it's nifsad. And when the baby's first cell emerges, it's a new mitzias. To give you a gashmir dugma, which I don't know if it's true apiteda, but I think it's a pretty good argument, is we are called placental animals. What does it mean placental? Every baby has a tube which is attached to the rechem, to the wall of the uterus of the mother, and it nourishes from the mother. What you don't know is that when a baby is conceived, it's not attached. When a baby is first conceived, the moment of pkida, the baby it's floating around. It's its own mitzias. It's eating its own yolk, so to speak, like animals in an egg. And after a few days, it implants. So it's not the pshat the baby grows from the mother. First, the baby is a mitzias. Then it attaches itself to the mother to go mikatnas legatlas, like a muzzle. But the actual nakuda of this child is a brand new mitzias. This new mitzias comes from an old mitzias. But the way the new comes from the old is b'derach dilug, as if it's brand new. Here, the Alter Rebbe is going to add noch a nakuda, which is an interesting nakuda, and of course, tzarech be rav arochav in pshat. And that is that plants, there's two types of plants, buklolos. There's plants that grow because you plant them, and there's plants that grow by themselves even if you didn't plant them. So the Rebbe says, when you plant a seed and it grows, it's me'ein yesh, but this is not today's shir, this is tomorrow's shir, test. It's me'ein yesh me'ayin. When you didn't plant a seed, it's mamash yesh me'ayin. The earth just produced something that was not at all inspired by something minachutz, the keir etzav sheba'aretz, which is earth, produced a new tzmicha that has no connection to prior life. Now again, a biologist would turn over in his grave and disagree, but the Rebbe says you should know there is a concept. If you have earth on this kador, and there are no seeds blowing in the wind, and there's no dormant seeds germinating underneath the ground, it's conceivable that the earth should produce tzmicha with zero zriyah. And the Alter Rebbe is going to say that that's mamash yesh me'ayin. It's conceivable the earth should produce tzmicha with zero zriyah. And that's how the Alter Rebbe says, yesh me'ayin now. Not yesh me'ayin in tchila sabriya, yesh me'ayin now. So the Alter Rebbe is making the argument. And of course, I've told you a lot of things that I didn't need to tell you. But the Alter Rebbe is making the argument that yesh me'ayin, the Eibishter made yesh me'ayin. And the source of yesh me'ayin comes from Ein Sof, Atzmus, Ilmi and Amor, it comes through Malchus and Shechina. But in this world, yesh me'ayin is happening now. It didn't just once upon a time happen, it's happening now too. And it's in the offer, it's in the earth, not in anything else. Other things contribute, like the baby that's yenik from the mother, that's only Mekatnas Lagadlos. The yesh me'ayin is a Metzias, it's a Naya Metzias. A baby is not half mother and half father, a baby is altogether baby. It's a Naya Metzias, it's a Diluk. So let's continue now. Okay? It says the Alter Rebbe that the Tzva Shamayim, the host, after the parenthesis, which is 8 or 9 lines in the top of Kuf Lam Bezim Rav, the Tzva Shamayim do not have the power to create Yesh Me'ayin, but only the earth that produces the Yesh Me'ayin Me'akeach HaTzemeach Shabei from the power of procreation which exists in the earth, Shehu Ayin Verochni, which is completely spiritual, Veheim, and the actual grass, and the actual trees, and the actual plants are Gashmiim. So when you see a tree growing, you're seeing Yesh Me'ayin, not that it happened, B'Sheshis Mei Bereshis, like the Ramban says, Bereshis Bora, it's happening right now. Ve'ein Zois Ella, how could the physical earth now make Yesh Me'ayin, or at least Me'ein Yesh Me'ayin? And the Teretz is Mishum de Ragle Ak, because the feet of Ak, Mestayim B'Tachtas Asiyah, end at the feet of Asiyah. And moreover, Tachas Raglav, underneath Asiyah, made it and said, Baruch HaSevav Kalam B'Lihefzik Rabbeneim. Sevav Kalam is closer to Asiyah than it is to the Ruchni Yizdika world, because if you have a line and a circle, the bottom of the line is closest to the opposite side of the circle. Azeh Chaptis. Whatever the lumdis is, Fana in Samach, the Samach Reish and Zayin, we explains this. Tachas Raglav, underneath the feet of Asiyah, there's a greater closeness to Sevav Kalam. B'li hefsek rav beineim, with much less separation than there is between the other side of the eagle and the higher world. Only the guliak. So you have two reasons why dafke in this physical earth there's a gila keich ein sof. Number one, even though the kav ends in atzilus, but ak goes till asiyah, and the fact that ak goes till asiyah brings ein sof to asiyah. Number two, Asiyah, because it's so low, is actually closest to the other side of Sevav Kalaman of the eagle, which is, again, a very funny concept. And the only thing which separates is the Iguleyak. There's Igulak and Yeshiravak. Yeshiravak is in this world. Iguleyak is makiv to this world. And around the Iguleyak, you have a Tachas Reya Selam, Sevav Kalam. V'gam, another purpose. Number 3. Hakav Me'erin Sof. Even though the Kav of Erin Sof, Hamestayim Besiyim Ragliak, which ends at the feet of Ak, is Meir Mimata Lamaila, bounces back from the bottom to the top of B'chinas Ercheza in what's called the rebounding light. Kamei, just as Shamalubush Ba'arech Va'avor V'zun Da'atzilus Meir Be'ercheza Malchav Da'atzilus. Just as we spoke earlier means on page Kuf Lamed Amid Beis that Malchus is the lowest sfira, but in terms of Mimata Lamaila, Malchus is the highest sfira. The same is true to a greater extent in Asiyah. This physical earth bounces back. All the inyanim of the sphere is higher than itself. The lowest sphere has direction to the highest sphere. And the same is true in Asiyah Agashmis even more. The same is true also at the end of the Kav, the Erin Sof of Erin Sof, which finishes the end of the feet of Ak, that it's made, it bounces back from the bottom to the top of B'chinas Eid Neshama, the Malchus Asiyah, Sholakus Mamish, Me'achsen the Kelim Malchus Atzilas. The Eid Neshama of Malchus comes from the Chisein the Kelim of Atzilas. And in the world, it's the lowest Madrega, so it's bouncing back. The Lumdus, I don't know. The Pshat is that the lowest Madrega has a higher Shadish. No, it's Chalosim B'Seif. So there's a number of reasons why Dafke and Asiyah you have the of Yesh Me'ayin. First of all, Ragliak. Second of all, the Gulam of Kav. And third of all, the Ercheza, that it's bouncing back. Those are 3 arguments saying that it makes sense to see Yesh Me'ayin more in Asiyah than any place else. This was the Shir of Ches Tishrei.